How's it going, everyone? Taki here. Today I've got another big video for you on a topic that Nintendo is not going to be happy about, but I believe the consequences of this product are so significant that all Switch owners need to be aware of it. As you may know, a third-party hardware solution for Nintendo Switch games has been available for several months, allowing people to rip and store physical games to an SD card. The second generation of these products is now here, and it's going to have an even bigger impact on the Nintendo Switch ecosystem. Today we're going to take a look at the first product in this second wave, the MIG-Switch version 2. Let's kick things off by comparing the V1 and the V2 MIG-Switch, and I made sure to get a Nintendo Switch SD card for this video to show my support. As you can see, both of these look the same. The PCB layout appears to be slightly different, but the biggest change is at the top. If we look there, we can see the number one most requested improvement, which is this little button over here that'll allow us to quickly switch between Switch games. This button is pretty tiny, so we need to zoom in a bit to make it easier to see. Right now, I'm using my fingernail to make it more obvious that I'm pressing it, but I could press it with my finger if I wanted. It's just not going to be that obvious for the camera. I'm assuming this kills the circuit to reset the active game in the same way that ejecting a card works with the original version. But let's do some testing to find out. For this demonstration, I already have a bunch of games selected that I put on my Switch SD card. You can go about this a few different ways. I used the dumper for this, but I could have used any of my modded Switches to do the same thing. Nintendo doesn't want people to be able to do stuff like this, but that's what I had to do for this video. And one thing that I want to emphasize before going any further, I've never used any of the MIG-Switch cards that I own to play games that I don't have physical copies of, so I don't know how difficult it is to source the game files that you need to be able to do this. All of the games that I have are complete backups of games that I own, so I know I'm not going to be at risk of potentially going online with a game that another person is also using online. I selected 8 games for this video that you can see right here. I don't want to be hit with a ninja star while I'm filming this video, so I plan to keep these within view of the camera during these tests. I'll grab my V1 Switch for this video, which already has 2 games in this main menu. You should be able to see the rest of this populated by the games that are on the SD card if this does work correctly. Let's insert the card. Okay, our first game is Let's Go Eevee, which is also the first game at the top. I didn't plan this. Now for the original card, you would have to reinsert the card quickly to switch to another game. You insert the card, quickly eject it, and then you put it back in. Let's try that again. This basically shows you why this new way will be much better. So we take it out, put it in, eject it, and put it back in again. So the old way apparently doesn't even work on this version. Eject it, put it in, eject it, put it back in. Yeah, so this seems like we can't even use the old method of changing games like we could with the first version. For a sanity check, let's just verify this with the original version. Now our starting game is Tears of the Kingdom, and after I go through the process, we have Xenoblade 2. If you only have 2 or 3 games, this old way isn't that bad, but we have 8, and this would be very annoying to switch between them. I'm going to put this in my dock just to make this a bit easier to film the button presses. I have this connected to my 7-inch Peak 2 portable screen. When I first heard about this tiny switch method, I was worried that you might end up ejecting the card trying to press the button, but that doesn't seem to be the case with this. When you press only on the button, you don't have enough force to be able to eject the entire cartridge, and it actually works out pretty well. I'm going to try to use the main part of my index finger to see if it will work. It's a small button, but you should be able to get at it, at least with this angle. So I'm going to press the button one time, and you'll see the game disconnects, and it reconnects as Xenoblade 3. And that was really easy. Let me try one more time. Okay, we have Minecraft there. Let's try again. Let's Go Eevee. Tears of the Kingdom. And Breath of the Wild. So as you can see, it's pretty fast. I will just say it's easier if you use your nail to press that because the surface area is not really that large on this button. They probably could have gone with a wider button for this to make it a bit easier to press, but this is a way better method than the old one. We're back in handheld mode right now with Breath of the Wild selected, and I'm just going to pick one of these 8 games at random to see what it would be like to change to the game that I want. I'm assuming this will just wrap around in the same order, so once you know what the order is, then you'll know where you are in the order. Right now, I don't know where I'm in the order, but I know that I want to play Xenoblade Chronicles 1. How much work will it take me to cycle to that game? I have my fingernail on the button right now, and I'm just going to do this until that game is selected. So we have Xenoblade 2, and then Xenoblade 1. So I got there right away. Let's pick a different game from the list. Now I want to play Minecraft. Again, I'm using my fingernail for this on the button. It's kind of weird that this doesn't go in alphabetical order, but now we're at Minecraft, and I wonder if it will swing back around with Double Cross before Xenoblade 3. Let's press this a few more times just to check. And it seems like it does maintain the same order. There's Breath of the Wild, Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade 1, Double Cross, and Xenoblade 3. It follows the same order. I will say that this isn't that bad. This is much better than the original one, but I only have 8 games for this. If I had more than 8 games, this would be just as annoying as the old way, especially because I'm bound to forget this somewhat random order that this is using. Ideally, you'd want to limit this to like 3 or 4 games, and that's where I see the value in this. If you want to leave your house with your Switch, but you don't want to risk losing some expensive physical games, just pop those on this, and you're good to go. The only way to improve things from here would be if they had an external game launcher, so you could just do this from a couch. It kind of doesn't make sense that the original version is so much worse than this because they must have known that doing the cart cycling was super janky. This is how it always should have been. Now, if you do not use your nail to do this, I don't think you'll be able to swap games at least in the orientation that I have my Switch. This seems impossible because the case is in the way. I think for most people, this part of the case right here is going to block you from being able to press this button with the surface of your finger. You really need to use your fingernail to do this consistently. If I press this any more than I am, the card is going to eject before I can press this button. That seems like the only con with this style. You need to use your fingernail to change games. Since I know the order of the games, I wonder if I can just like spam the button a bunch of times to change directly to the game that I want in the list. But it doesn't seem to matter how many times you press this button or how fast you press it, it'll still just go game by game through the entire list. Maybe they can improve this because if you knew that you only had 4 games on your card and you knew where you were in the list, it would be much better if you could quickly switch to any game you want in the list by pressing the correct amount of times. But I think what they should really do with this is the game should be in alphabetical order. That would make it way easier for you to be able to see where you are in the list instead of like you can see right here, this is pretty random. We go Xenoblade 2, 1, Double Cross, and then Xenoblade 3. That's kind of weird. Let's do a teardown on this before wrapping up the video. After taking off the cases on both versions, we can see that we are still using the same ESP32 and the same lattice FPGA. The board layout is largely the same, so this should have been fairly easy for them to put this together. I don't know if this is the real name, but these are referred to as turtle switches. It's just like a tactile switch with a button that's mounted on the side. These are usually used for R1 and L1 in handhelds. Usually these parts are rated for a certain amount of button presses before they will fail, and whenever I've been in situations where I have to pick components for a board, the data sheets will usually say that a part is rated for like 50,000 button presses, but there's always some Japanese part that's rated for 100,000 or more. In some cases, there's a Chinese part that's rated for the same amount, but people will usually go for the more expensive Japanese part if they can. Since we can't use the old method of changing the games, if this switch breaks, then you're pretty much SOL with the current firmware, unless they add a fallback solution in an update. If this turtle switch breaks, then you'd need a source and solder a new one here, or you'd be limited to only playing a single game. That's not going to happen anytime soon, but it can certainly happen at some point. Aside from that, they just moved a few traces and a few vias to different spots. As I mentioned before, the hardware in this costs like $10 or more at the most, so there's a lot of room for the price to drop on this hardware as more and more companies start entering back into this market like the good old R4 days. There is also probably room for someone to 3D print a slightly taller button for this that's easier to press with your finger. That's all I have for the teardown. It did dawn on me that I didn't actually launch any of the games in this video, but that does work. After the game shows up in the menu, it launches just like a normal game. I'm not online for this, but I do have full backups of these games that I used for this video, so I could go online if I wanted to. At least that's what they say. I want to wrap up this video with my closing thoughts on the MIG-Switch version 2. From the V1 to the V2, I think this is a much better product than the first one. Whether it's worth buying or not really comes down to your situation. Personally, the only way that I would use something like this is if I was going to travel and I didn't want to bring a bunch of expensive games that I wouldn't want to lose. I have a lot of imported Switch games that would be annoying to replace. If I lose like 4 or 5 of these, I'm already out the cost of a Switch. For home use, real carts are easier to use right now if you're doing this the legit route. This is redundant if you have a modded Switch. Now I do want to talk about shipping since I never commented on it. I've never had any store links to stores that sell these MIG-Switch devices because I'm not really interested in any of that, but I do know that there are a lot of people that are still waiting for this and the dumper. And for the record, I think the dumper is the best product that they have because it even allows you to play physical Switch games on your PC. But if you're someone that is still waiting on a V1 card, they said they're going to upgrade everyone to this version, which is a nice upgrade, but they really need to improve their shipping speed because they are very far behind based on the comments that I've been seeing online. My concerns about this product are the same that they were in my original video. When companies start selling this hardware for $20 to $25, I think that's when we're going to be in a situation where people will just do repo clones of valuable games. They'll be functionally the same as this, but they won't have an SD card slot. The game will just be on the board on some NAND chip. When that happens, it will have a huge impact on the Switch market, new and used. That also brings us to the Switch 2. A lot of people were worried that the Switch 2 was delayed to remove any backward compatibility that it may have had. Nintendo sold like 140 million Switch models, so I think it would be kind of foolish of them to not make the Switch 2 backwards compatible with normal Switch games. If they wanted to completely make something like this irrelevant for someone like me, they could just allow users to temporarily store their games on the internal drive. Even if that only gave you like a day of use without having to reinsert the card to authenticate it, that would be awesome for people that like to buy physical games. If Nintendo is planning to make the Switch 2 backwards compatible, I think we're in the calm before the storm because there will be a ton of these on the market before the end of the year. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at my recent video on the RG35XX SP. That's a Game Boy Advance SP clone that runs plenty of Nintendo games. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.